Hi, and welcome to Hot Off the Press, the show about new releases and the authors that bring them to you. Tonight on ConTinual, I'll be your host, Jim Nettles. And before we get started to find out about what you're going to be using to stack up that to-be-read pile for this summer, let's go around and see who has shown up to bring some new work. So, Katie, you are up first.
Hi, I'm Katie Cross. I write young adult fantasy that you can find at katiecrossbooks.com.
Jam?
Hey, I'm Jim Chambers. I'm a Bram Stoker award-winning author and editor. You can find me online at jameschambersonline.com. I write a lot of short fiction in multiple genres and have edited some horror anthologies recently.
Marion?
Hi, I'm Marion Deeds. You can find my fantasy novels, excuse me, at Falstaff Books or on Amazon, and you can find my fantasy noir novella from Tor.com in bookstores just about everywhere.
Ty?
My name is Ty Drago. I write mostly speculative fiction, some historical fiction. You can find me at tydrago.com. You can find me on my online magazine, Allegory, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter.
Carol?
Hi, I'm Carol Gyzander. I'm a Bram Stoker Award-nominated author and an editor of I write both horror, sci-fi, and suspense stuff from the northern New Jersey suburbs of New York City. And I can be found on carolgyzander.com and the same name on all the other places.
Darin?
Hi, Darin Kennedy. I write paranormal mystery thriller and contemporary fantasy, and I'm at darinkennedy.com. One R, one I.
Nope. Matthew?
I'm Matthew Saunders. I write primarily historical fantasy, Gothic horror, Southern Gothic, and I can be found at jmsaunders.com.
And Becke?
Hi, I'm Becke Turner. You can find me at becketurner.com, and I write sweet contemporary romance.
Well, you're going to get to be the one to round out to give the happy endings tonight. So,
Yeah, for you.
Katie, why don't you tell us a little bit about that new release of yours?
Yeah, so I actually launch a new book every first Friday of the month. So this month's new book was titled Derek. I have a series, it's called the Network Saga. It's the second series for my character, Bianca Monroe. It starts with this book right here, Miss Mabel's School for Girls. And what I've done by my reader request is the series is going to have 4 novels. And it's a first-person point of view. So my readers wanted all the backstory for all the other characters. So in between launching the novels, which I launch every 3 months, I launch a novella that takes place from another character. So Derek was the novella that I launched this month, and it's about her father, who in my fantasy world is basically like a special forces soldier. They call them protectors. And it's a medieval secondary fantasy world where they use magic, not really technology. And, you know, they're still burning candles and that kind of stuff because it's more medieval. And he's of this uber magic user in this world. And he got his own book. And it was really, really highly anticipated by my readership. So we're actually doing book clubs and all this other stuff for it this week. And the party is still celebrating this launch. It's kind of embedded in the series, though, so the best place to start if readers are interested is this book that I held up. It's Miss Mabel's School for Girls.
So, Jim, how about you?
Sure. The book, the upcoming release that I'm talking about is called Even in the Grave. I have an advanced copy of it here. I co-edited this with Carol Gyzander, who is with us tonight. And this is an anthology of ghost stories. And back in let's say, I think about April of 2020, just as the troubles were descending upon us, I had the idea that it might be fun to do something that would be kind of, a little bit of an escape for some authors that I know, and talked to Carol about, hey, look, do you want to just do a book of ghost stories with me? And Carol foolishly said yes, and it wound up taking much longer than we thought, but here it is coming out officially. I think there have been some early copies released from eSpec Books, and it just features a selection, a mix of classic ghost stories, that all original, all except for I think we have 1 or 2 stories that are reprints, but are original ghost stories, not retellings of anything. And it spans the range of pulp horror to sort of historical ghost horror to modern, very modern stories. We have one that's very rooted in technology, and some really kind of out there ghost stories too. I mean, one of the most interesting or unique tales we got was called Rawhide Wrecks. And I'm not going to tell you more than that because it would spoil the surprise of the story. But we had a lot of fun working with the authors, gathering the ghost stories, and just, sort of digging into that classic of the horror genre, the ghost story. And we're hoping that everyone will enjoy it when it comes out. You can find it. I think it's available for pre-order on all of the usual channels, Amazon and such, and as well at eSpec Books.
So Marion, what are you bringing out this time?
The third book in the Copper Road trilogy from Falstaff, which is called Golden Rifts, just came out late May. Trevian and Aaron, who are the characters that carry through all three books. Aaron is a traveler. It's a portal fantasy, and she traveled from this world to Trevian's world. They thought they had closed the portal that the hive mind parasite invaders were using. And they did close it, and they thought that was mission accomplished, but it turns out there's another portal. So they have to find it and close it. And they're on an expedition with people from 4 of the countries that are on the continent that they're on. But not everybody from every country gets along with everyone. And so there's quite a bit of distrust on the road to finding this final portal. And that intensifies into some full-blown paranoia when they find out they have a spy. So readers will find out how Trevian's world ended up the way it did. They'll learn a little more about the elemental beings that inhabit the world, and they'll find out what happened to Trevian and Adine's mother, who disappeared when they were small. And fans of Adine, who is Trevian's sister, and her lover Ilsanja will be not surprised to know that they're back in the town of White Bluffs, and that Adine's evil uncle is still around, and no surprise, still evil. And they are trying to protect the town and the family business from him and from the parasites. And one other thing for people who've read the other books, we finally meet the 4th guardian, who has been talked about in the first 2 books, but we hadn't really met them before. And that's from Falstaff, and you can find it on Amazon.
Hi, what have you got?
Well, I've got one coming out next month called Rags. It's a horror story set in 1982, Atlantic City, just at the birth of the casinos. And it tells the story of a 16-year-old girl named Abby Lowell, who lives in a crowded but loving foster home, orphaned for as long as she can remember, who has her life saved by a figure wrapped in dumpster divings with a huge hood and a big black knife that he's not afraid to use. He's violent, doesn't say much, and is always there when she needs it, which is good because there is a ruthless criminal element coming into the city that wants the hotel that her foster family lives in, and they're going to stop at nothing to get it. So it's a situation where Abby has to turn to this mysterious, dangerous savior to make an ally of him, and in an effort to save her home. Had a lot of fun writing it. It's I know Atlantic City quite well, so I spent a lot of time there and getting to know the place, and I'm very excited about this one. I think it's a good, scary, fun YA.
So Carol, what about you?
I have a cryptid novella, and here's this one. It's called Forget Me Not. This is volume 10 in the Systema Paradoxus series of cryptid novellas, and Jim Chambers did one earlier in the series as well. This one takes place in the Lake Erie section of New York State around Buffalo and Niagara Falls. And it's about a pair of twins, Jane and her twin brother, Rob, who are scared of the water for reasons because of their early past. They've been avoiding going in the water ever since something bad happened. And when the bad thing comes back again and swamps the boat, when they finally go back out, their dad sort of takes them into his confidence, figures they're old enough now at the age of 16 to fill them in on the family history. So we have two time eras in the story, 1969, when we see the kids first, and then the family history in 1939. And we learn a little bit more about what it is that's supposed to be the monster of Lake Erie. Should they give up on all their family ties? Should they continue and voyage on with the mystery? We'll have to see.
Darin?
Hello. So mine is kind of a long story, or the story to get here is a long story. Back in 2003, when I was stationed in Iraq during OIF-1, I wrote the first half of the first book of the pawn stratagem called Ponz Gambit, which is my take on a magical chess game that happens every few hundred years to decide the fate of the world. And I got back over 2004, 2005. I finished writing that, but it never was published until 2016 because I was working on other things, worked on some other projects. But the third book in that trilogy, called King's Crisis, is now out. And so when I say I've literally been working on this series for 19 years, I'm not joking. And the gist of it is that ordinary people find out that they have been selected by a magical game that was set up centuries ago to get plucked from their ordinary lives and fight against an opposing force, and in doing so, saving the earth from destruction. In the first book, my white pawn, Stephen Bauer, is trying to gather all of his pieces together because the other side got all their powers early and said, you know what? The easiest way to win a game is to wipe out the other side before they even know they're in a game. So the first book is gather them, the second book is scatter them, and the third book is let them fight. And when I tell you that last battle is 35,000 words, I'm not even exaggerating. And go and get it. It's available on Amazon. Your local bookstore can order it, and it's a hardcover, paperback, ebook, and we'll probably eventually have an audiobook, though not yet.
Matthew?
Okay, so I have this. It's Nothing But the Blood. It is a Southern Gothic. It is set in a small town in South Carolina in 1962. It is about a school teacher and an auto mechanic who have to team up with an Israeli Mossad agent to fight a fugitive Nazi war criminal who also happens to be a werewolf who is terrorizing their small town. I got the idea because the Nazis, after the end of World War II, that were trying to fight a guerrilla war against the Allies occupying Germany, were called werewolves. The operation was Operation Werewolf. No one knows where that name actually came from. So my idea was, what if they actually were werewolves? So that's where the inspiration came from for this. And also, it has all the, when I was writing it, I called it the kitchen sink Southern Gothic because it's got, the kudzu covered decaying plantation house. It's got the meeting the devil at the crossroads. It's got the snake handling tent revival preacher. It's got hoodoo magic. It's got all of it, pretty much any Southern Gothic trope I could think of. I just put it all in the blender, let it go. So that's that came out actually a week ago today. So it's available on Amazon in ebook, paperback, or hardcover.
And Becke, since you're coming in with that romance.
I'll just soothe the soul after all the scary stuff going on. This is, I'm writing on June 20th, my book comes out, and this is number 6 of my Clock Tower romance series. And that series is set in Sunbury, North Carolina, which actually was modeled after Newberry, South Carolina, which is where I live. And in this story, I have a lot of fun with this story. This is Nate. He's the third of the brothers that you meet in the first story. And so I came up, I don't know if y'all have seen Yellowstone, But Beth Dutton just totally blew me away because she is such an evil little gal, but the audience loved her. And I thought, well, it was a challenge for me. I thought, I want to write a character like that. So think of Beth Dutton meeting George Bailey from It's a Wonderful Life. And so those are the two that I put together. And it was a lot of fun to write this story. And it's a redemption story, obviously, because we're going to have to redeem the Beth character, which is Chaz. Her name is Chaz Gaieti in the story. And like I said, it was a lot of fun, and it will be out on June 20th. And it was number 6. And like everybody else, I kind of pulled the trigger. I wrote one book and put it out on the night in 2019. And then last year was a bumper year. I did 4. So this year, this is my first one. So slow down a little bit here. And you can find this on Amazon. You can pre-order it now, but it'll be released on the 20th.
Let's talk a little bit more, about what kind of a world is everybody going to fall into with these different books? Because that's one of those things. We always want to know what kind of experiences am I going to go through. We kind of hit on some of that. So, Jim, if you look at all the worlds that are in the anthology, all the things, is there one in there that I think you could, maybe hit on? Something that was really fun, something that was a little bit different, a little bit unique. What about out of all the collection, is there one that really stood out to you?
Yeah, it's hard to pick one because they all really took an original perspective on the ghost story. And we had some authors with some very powerful voices bringing sort of their take to it. I mentioned Rawhide Wrecks, which features a unique ghost. And I think that the story that sort of hit the bullseye for me was our lead story, The Final Experiment of Eugene Appleton by Alan Bird. And it is really a wonderful and original take on the pulp horror ghost story. So there's a little bit of mad science, there's a little bit of supernatural stuff going on, there's creeping around graveyards, there's some fanciful technology, but at heart, it is a ghost story. And we actually selected that as the first story because we felt it really set the tone for the anthology. And then I think you're going to, once you get into the other stories, each one is, its own little world. And we have some classic ghost stories in old mansions, and some, we have one that takes place in medieval Japan. So it's, it spans, there are a couple that take place in New York City and that are very, distinct for their urban features. So it was a lot of fun to see the different takes on it, but the Final Experiment of Eugene Appleton, I think, was the one that summed up what we were really hoping for.
How about you, Marion? So when we walk into this world, because, obviously you're a few books in at this point, and going through the portals and kind of going through the journey, what may be kind of different, or what's going to pull people through this time? What is it about this world that keeps pulling you back in?
I wanted to write a world that did not have a lot of high technology, had a lot of magic, and had a practical or pragmatic approach to magic. That's kind of what I was playing with. I think I would say I was a little influenced originally by the idea of steampunk. The world that they inhabit is not quite at the late Victorian era by any means. I would say they're just slightly ahead of the or behind. They're coming up on the Industrial Revolution. But what we find out, of course, over the course of the books is that world has had a technological and social collapse 300 years ago. And that before then, their technology was a lot closer to where ours is. In fact, it was probably beyond where ours is right now. So they have charms and they have magical implements, but it's way less mystical and it's way more practical. You put wards on your horse's hooves to keep earth elementals from coming up out of the ground and eating them, because the wards will drive off the earth elementals. You use magical things you have magical fire lighters and mundane fire starters like sparkers in case your magic, doesn't work for some reason. And I also wanted to play a little bit with the politics. So they have almost a parliamentary political system in the country that most of the books take place in. And they also have a thing that's kind of like the Federal Reserve, only it has an awful lot of influence for being something that basically controls prices of a particular commodity, and that's the Copper Coalition. So I wanted to play a little bit with, what the different ways politics can look and the different ways commerce can look. Oh,
Ty?
and horses.
Oh.
I think I said that. And they have horses.
And horses.
Yes, very important.
So what about you, Ty? What do we get to walk into in your world?
Well, Atlantic City in 1982 was in transition. A lot of the book centers around Steel Pier. I'm not familiar with the Steel Pier, but Steel Pier in its heyday was the sparkling jewel of Atlantic City's crown. It was a spectacular, massive entertainment venue that extended a half a mile out of the Atlantic Ocean. By the time the book takes place, Steel Pier has been derelict for a number of years now. It's completely deserted, but my heroine is fascinated by it. She is what is called a creeper, which is someone who goes into old derelict buildings for the sole purpose of exploring and absorbing the vibe, not to loot or vandalize. Almost like an amateur archaeologist, and she loves Steel Pier. As it happened, Steel Pier burned in 1982, and this is the story, my version of how that fire happened. But it's basically about a city in transition, a city that has been in decline and is now going to have what is supposed to be a rebirth with the casinos. It's a period piece in its way, I suppose. 1982 was a long time ago, but I think I've done my best to bring it to life and make it real.
Carol, what about you?
Well, I mentioned that my 16-year-old twins are starting out in 1969. So we have a really kind of fun visit of what was going on in that era in the Buffalo vicinity. That's the year that they turned off part of Niagara Falls, and that plays a pretty prominent part in the book. But then we go through their diary back to see what happened with Grandma, who is somehow connected to this creature in the water. Back in 1939, and one of my beta readers was so excited. She says, "You actually defined 2 time periods and a monster in a novella. This was awesome." So that was really sweet to hear. And I have to say, this is not a scary, blood-ripping monster tale. It's more of an intriguing, what is it in the water, tied in with sort of a romantic love story. So that maybe ties in with Becky's a little bit.
Darin?
So my world is 21st century, and it's basically what's right outside your door. You can sort of think of it in the same vein as sort of your Highlander sort of thing, where there's a lot of things going on that the average human being doesn't know. Not so much like Buffy, where there's vampires and werewolves everywhere, but that there is magic. You don't see it very much these days, but whenever it comes to bear, it's there, because the chess game that is going on was designed hundreds of years ago in an effort to keep the occasional cataclysms that do things like make Atlantis go away or cause ice ages or take out the dinosaurs. They said, we should probably stop that from happening. And through my hand wavium, the way that they decided to do that was channel those big forces that do all that nasty stuff to our Earth into a few select individuals, let them bring those forces against each other, and in doing so, dissipate the energies back into the universe, and doing it in kind of a cool, stylish way with a game. But if one side decides they actually want to win and take advantage of all that power, then we have a problem. There is time travel, and one of my favorite things in mine is there's various flavors of time travel out in fiction, and mine, that I like to employ is the one where you cannot go back and change something. If you went back, then you already went back, and your involvement in the past has already been factored into the present. You can't travel to the future, but you can travel to the past, but you've already been there, and you might have even met yourself. Hard to say. So there's time travel, there's magic, there's anything that you could imagine can happen within reason,
including blowing up half of Atlanta.
I only blew up one city block of Atlanta and at least 4 national monuments in book 2. And true story.
Straight.
Matthew?
Okay, so mine is it's a fictional town. It's called Avalon, South Carolina. It is somewhere between Columbia and the coast, for those of you familiar with the geography of South Carolina. Like I said, it's set in 1962. It's not an old, decaying, dying town like you normally would see in a Southern Gothic. It's the New South. That was about the time that a lot of industry was going to that area. And so, it's actually a fairly vibrant, healthy town, but the old South sort of doesn't go away. It's a mostly white community. There's a mostly Black community nearby called Ezekiel's Mill. That 1962 was just before widespread integration of the schools came to South Carolina. So at the beginning of the story, you have a group of Black children that have been taken from their community and put into the white Avalon schools, like just a handful of them, like maybe 5 or 6 elementary school children, 5 or 6 middle school, 5 or 6 high school kids. And while there was some issues when that happened, there wasn't any violence, and since then tensions have died down. The story actually takes place a year or so after that happened. And like I said, you find out, especially when the Nazi werewolf comes into the story, that those old South things are still there, and rear up, and kind of influence what happens in the story, and cause some issues for a lot of the characters. So that's kind of where we are at the beginning of the story, and that's kind of the town, the way what the town is like, basically.
Becke?
Well, all of my stories are, the theme is coming home or building your home. And so, and it's a small town. And what I'm bringing to bear in this one, and it's not just, in order to redeem this character, we don't just bring in the Murphy family, which that family has gone throughout the series, but it's also about the community. So you're going to get this community that cares about somebody. So it's probably the type of hometown that maybe we all would like to have. I don't know that it actually exists, but it is a happily ever after. And anyway, and it's that entire community. So to me, it's a very, very generous, very loving community that brings this particular person, the Becke Turner type of person, into the fold.
Katie?
My world, like readers can expect to pretty much jump feet first into a medieval fantasy story with dragons and sword and sorcery and magical forests and lots of creatures and incantation-based magic, which is, there's an incantation that you say and then the magic happens. I have a lot of really traditional coming of age themes. My character Bianca starts out at 16 and her 8th novel will take her into like 23. So just a lot of really fun like magic and creatures that are new and Harry Potter-esque sort of feel to the traditional like nature of it with like big stone castles and all that kind of stuff.
Well, when we dive into any story, one of the things that we always really want to do is meet the characters, and no matter what it is, some of us love our protagonists, some of us love our villains, some of us just have that side character that, you know, we really latch onto, and we want to tell more of that story. So Marion, out of everybody in the current release, who's kind of that favorite character you like playing with? And, you know, what can we kind of expect to learn about them? What can we kind of get about them without giving too much away?
So I think my favorite character is Trevian's sister. She's an inventor. She likes to tinker with things. She's very, very smart. She's very practical. She fell into a very traditional female role, and not so much even within the world as within our world, that she had an emotionally distant dad and a rebellious older brother, and she was the one who kept the household running. And she refers to herself as the invisible Langtree because she keeps things going, she manages things run smoothly, and she thinks nobody really notices her. My second favorite character is her lover, Ilsanja, because Ilsanja is exactly the opposite. Ilsanja is a society girl, and she's a fashionista, and she's very socially astute, and she can follow power, and she can wield power. And Aideen spends 2 books in the best sort of romance couple tradition, not understanding how this glamorous creature could see anything in her. But I hope that the readers I hope they realize that Aideen is really pretty cool. She also is the character who actually goes through sort of the biggest, I'm not sure what I would call it, philosophical change or a moment of enlightenment, because this community there are elemental beings in this world, and they use fire elementals as an energy source. And they've never given any thought to what fire elementals might be. Like, might they be social? Might they be intelligent? Might they be self-aware? Might they have feelings? None of that has ever really come up. And she, in this third book, Golden Rifts, she's forced to start asking herself those questions, and the answers are leading her in a very uncomfortable direction that she has to deal with. So I really liked writing her for that.
How about you, Ty?
Favorite character from Rags? My favorite characters from Rags, well, to be honest with you, I kind of lean toward villains. I like bad guys, and I take great pride in my bad guys. And in this one, the bad guys are particularly nasty. They're a couple of brothers, Bernard brothers, who are they're Creole, and they're just vicious men. But they have a grandmother, an ancient grandmother, who is a voodoo, it's called a Bokor, a voodoo witch. Of tremendous power, who is basically the force behind them, and she's 100 times worse than they are. And I really, really love her because she does not have a shred of pity. And then she's facing against this supernatural thing that Rags is, that is Abby's champion, and is finds something she actually fears. So I had a lot of fun with that. Gotta love a bad guy.
Absolutely.
Gotta love a bad guy. Yeah. Well, my favorite character in the novella is Grandma Emily back in 1939, because not only is she raising a small daughter, at the same time she and her husband are working on getting this carnival going, and she knew nothing about the carnival world when she married him. So she's pulled in many different directions, and she has to make a very daring choice to help save the carnival and rise to the occasion, which made my heart warm to watch her go through that. So.
Darin?
I'm going to go with villains too. Right off the bat, other than my main character, the first person you meet in Ponz Gambit is Magdalene, who is the Black Queen. And when I wrote Ponz Gambit, I actually didn't know what her backstory was, but I knew that she was angry about something. So when I write her dialogue, I usually think of what is the meanest, nastiest thing someone could say right now? And then I have her say it pretty much every single time. And
I love it.
so, but the really fun thing was I didn't exactly know why. Then all of a sudden in book 2, whenever I decided to have a book 2, because it was originally going to just be one big long book, book 2, we start doing time travel. And then you find out maybe some of these people have run into each other before, but not in the correct order. And then all of her, I'm not very nice to you, suddenly makes an awful lot of sense. Then when you get to book 3, and now everybody knows where everybody knows everybody from, then it's real. And man, she's like, oh, I've been waiting to tell you how much I hate your guts. But they told me I couldn't, but now I can. So here we go. And then we fight. I love Magdalene. She is awesome. I miss writing her. And I'll let somebody else go.
So Matthew, how about you? Who's your favorite out of this one?
That was hard to say. I've got with the 3 big main characters. There's Jamie Fletcher, who is an auto mechanic. He's also an Army vet. He was in the Korean War. He kind of just wants to be left alone, but gets sucked into things because he finds he kind of doesn't wind up having a choice in the matter. Then there's David Ben-Ari, who is the Israeli Mossad agent, who is very bitter and alcoholic and snarky and kind of just wants to kill all the Nazis, which you can't blame him when you find out why. But so he was fun to write. I guess though maybe my favorite though would be the other one of the big 3. She's her name is Addie Pritchard, and she's a school teacher. She's a Black school teacher from that community, Ezekiel's Mill. She starts out basically just wants enough textbooks for her kids. That's what she wants. It's just it's the beginning of the school year. She doesn't have enough textbooks. All the history books only have 48 stars on the American flag, even though it's 1962. But then you find out through the course of the book that she's got a bit more steel in her than she lets on at the beginning, and then probably she even knows. So by the end of the book, she's pretty much a badass by the end of the book. So I kind of liked writing her and writing her story arc and that progression.
Becke, how about you? Who's your favorite?
I think Chaz was my favorite. I can tell you that my beta reader, I had to dial her back because I had so much fun with her. And I think she just I took off with her and got ornerier and ornerier. And the beta reader said, hey, wait, I don't like her anymore. So, but it was a lot of fun writing her. And it was also a lot of fun to write the arc and to motivate her and show what drove this, what in her background drove this. And you just give little pieces, and you're only going to give, you're talking about a character, and then maybe she'll give you one clue about, how she lived prior to this time and why she is the way she is. So I think that component of it is a lot of fun to write.
Katie?
I was going to say just one other thing. I had a pair of twins, octogenarian twins, 2 males in assisted living, and they were a lot of fun too.
I'm gonna go a little off the beaten path here. Can I choose a place in my story that was really fun?
Sure.
So, I love all my characters, but I don't love all of them, but I love to hate a lot of them. And I think my favorite in this story was actually a place that I created that was called Feilenborg. And Feilenborg is basically a buried city. So in my world, there's a place called the Ark, which is this big castle in a desert. And the castle is sort of built into a wall of like red rock cliffs, kind of like you'd see in like southern Utah or something. But you can go into some caves behind those rocks, and there's a legend that there's a buried city called Borg that a goddess basically like planted this mountain on top of to hide it because it was so evil. And my character Derek has to go into Borg where magic stops working, like the magic just stops working there, and there's no light that will survive. So he has to like go into these byways and throughways, and the walls move and the floors lift, and there's like screaming sounds and bioluminescent stuff, and he has to go in and save someone. So I had a really great time like writing this crazy place and thinking up like the story behind it. And I don't actually even know like why magic doesn't work, or like what the story is behind it. But I do know that there is a city that a goddess is like trying to hide, and a lot of people use it for like an underground place to hide. And a lot of people just get lost there because the halls move and the floors lift and lower unexpectedly. And if you're not keeping track and really paying attention, you get lost, you never get back out. So that was really, really fun. That really got my imagination going.
I think I've been in that office or that bar. Jim, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't write any of the stories in the anthology, but I certainly found plenty of characters that I really enjoyed or thought were fascinating. I mean, I'll pick one that springs to mind, which is the ghostly grandmother from one of our stories who is slightly tech challenged and apparently had a far more interesting youth than the main character in the story realized at the time that she knew her. So it's kind of one of the more fun pieces in the book, but it's really it's a story that's essentially a conversation, and it's told in the form of text messages. And it just does such a great job of bringing character across in dialogue, essentially, just short snippets of communication. And I think Carol and I both really felt strongly that it was a great story and a very nice counterweight to some of the darker pieces in the book.
And Carol, any thoughts on the anthology? Just out of curiosity, since you were also editing that.
Well, I really had a lot of fun watching the way that people brought the ghosts out in different time periods in different locations. And we actually have two stories, as Jim mentioned, in New York City, in apartments in New York City, but they're very different. So I love when people take the same thing and do something entirely different with it.
Well, one of my favorite things is this, as a writer, as writers, one of the favorite things is, what are the rabbit holes we fall down? When you start doing the research, when you start looking into stuff, sometimes you just come across that discovery, that lesson, that thing that just pops up and you go, well, I didn't expect that. That's got to go in. So Ty, what was the thing you learned out of this one? What's the rabbit hole you fell down? What's the thing that surprised you as you were crafting this one?
I went down to the Atlantic City Library, and I spent an afternoon there working with a librarian trying to dig up everything they possibly had on Steel Pier at the end of its life. Not easy to find. There's tons of stuff from its heyday, but the last few years and what it looked like and what happened to it was interesting. I mean, this is the place that was famous for having a horse that would be forced to dive 40 feet into a pool of water. Made a movie out of it once. So I was trying to get into that, and I came across some very interesting things that I did not know, such as the big theater in Steel Pier at the end of his life was turned into a boxing ring. And I realized, just as you said, oh my goodness, I have got to use that. So there's a really nasty, bloody scene inside a boxing ring in Steel Pier late at night. So yeah, I know exactly what you mean. You stumble across these little gems that never occurred to you, and suddenly you have to rethink a whole piece of your plot, make it fit.
How about you, Carol? What did you come across?
I didn't just fall down a rabbit hole. I went over Niagara Falls in a barrel. I was looking at all the sightings of this particular Lake Erie cryptid monster, and one of which was in 1969 in, of course, that area. And so I poked around and said, well, what was going on at that time period? And that's when I realized, I had lived in the area, but I realized that was when they turned off Niagara Falls. So that took me down a whole lot of really fun stuff of what did they do? How did they do it? Why were they doing that? So yeah, I may have seen it as a kid, but now I know an awful lot more about it.
Darin?
There were many, so I'll pick one. So when you have all your people stuck in the past in your second book, and they are stripped of their magic, because magic only works whenever it's the time of the game, you have to be able to find places on the world where there's a little more magic than average. And there is a place down near Miami, Florida called the Coral Castle. Is anyone familiar with it? So it's a man named Edward Leeds Scownon who came over from Europe, lovelorn because his soon-to-be 16-year-old bride, which is the cause of the song by Billy Idol, Sweet 16, is all about Ed Leeds Scownon and his 16-year-old bride who left him at the altar. I don't know if she actually made it to the altar. So in his heartbroken status, he went down to Florida because I think he had tuberculosis, and he went down there for his health, but then he decided to build a castle in her honor. So he has these like several ton hunks of coral that he hand built all by himself with some machinery, and has this castle that's still right there in Homestead, Florida, and you can go visit it. And he built using a tire axle and a 9-ton thing, has created a revolving door. You can move a 9-ton rock with one hand and spin it around. So I wrote about it, but then I was like, I got to go see this place. So the next time I was down in Florida, I actually have been to the Coral Castle to see this place that Ed Leeds Scownon built. And I saw the second story castle room that he built for himself to sleep in, and poor man. And then of course, if you're in the past, I wrote him into the story. So my characters have met Ed Leeds Scownon and hung out with him in the Coral Castle, and utilized in my world the little bit of magic in that place that helped this itty bitty little man build a fortress of 9-ton hunks of rock all by himself to travel on to the next place they needed to go in time. So that's a little hint from actually book 2, not book 3.
And Katie, I know you need to jump, but do you want to let everybody know where to find you? And if you've got a particular rabbit hole you went down with this particular one?
Yeah, sorry, I have to go parent for a little bit. So I think my rabbit hole for this was just my character Derek. I'm a little bit like Becke, and I just kind of went overboard with my love for him. And I saw it coming, so I was able to rein myself back in. But he's a fan favorite, so I haven't had any complaints yet, because he's pretty swoony that way. So I think just for me, that just the story itself, being able to give him a narrative, give him like this story that really just belonged to him, and built up an arc for him that I could just focus on him, was kind of the rabbit hole for me. I don't really get to do that kind of thing all that much when I have like my series that focuses on his daughter. So I think that was probably my favorite. And yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's so fun. It was good to meet everyone here. If anyone is interested in my books, you can go to katiecrossbooks.com. There's a bar at the top. You can just put your email and get my first dragon book titled Flame for free. So thanks for having me.
Thanks, Katie. So Matthew, what about you? What rabbit hole did you get sucked into learning all about the 50s and 60s?
Okay, well, unfortunately, the rabbit hole I got sucked into was researching the Klan and Klan activity in the 60s in South Carolina, and Klan rituals and induction ceremonies and not very fun things like that, things that I needed to go take a long hot shower after I read. So I won't necessarily talk about that, but one of the interesting things I did for my research was I found newspapers from that time. You know, I have another series I write that's set in Greenville, South Carolina in the 70s. What I did for that was I subscribed to the online version of the Greenville News, which has archived all of their issues going all the way back to, you know, almost to when it was first published. So for that, you know, when I used that for that series just to get a flavor of the time period, I did the same thing for this, you know, even though it's not set in Greenville, I still went back and I read those newspapers from the 60s just to get the flavor for the time period and things, you know, TV shows, movies that were going on, people, what people were talking about, what was in the news, without the filter of, you know, 60 years of history. And just just the little gems though in the paper that you find is like the fact that HIPAA did not exist. So you get an entire column in the paper of people being admitted to the hospital and why. Like literally, like Joe Bob Smith was admitted to the hospital Saturday night after he fell off a ladder and broke his arm. You know, just a whole list of just why people are in the hospital. And then you know, the things that I don't even know what it's called anymore. But visiting, you know, there's this whole column of little snippets of, you know, Mr. and Mrs. Jim Smith are visiting cousins in Palo Alto, California for 2 weeks, followed by a trip to Yosemite National Park. Just you know, a whole column of just little things like that, you know, and it's these little cultural things that we don't have anymore, you know, because if you put that in the paper now, it'd be like, hey, come rob me. But you know, so I enjoyed, you know, when I was doing the research, just finding little things like that they didn't necessarily make it in the story, but just they were interesting to me because, you know, it's not that far removed in time, but just the world is so different.
Becke, how about you? What rabbit hole did you fall in this time?
I found a great one. One of my characters, she has a pink Cadillac, and most of you know, it's the Mary Kay Cosmetics. She used to give those out to her top salespeople. But I read about Mary Kay when she first decided to get the pink Cadillac. She actually went to the Lincoln dealer, and she goes down to the Lincoln dealer and she tells him she wants a pink Lincoln. And he says, honey, why don't you go talk to your husband and then bring him and we'll talk about it. So she went to the Cadillac dealer, and that's where they got the pink Cadillacs. And I love that story.
Marion?
I had a friend who sold Mary Kay for a while, and one of the sayings was, when something was really good, you said, wow, that's really pink Cadillac. I really like that. And now knowing that story, I like it even a little more. So I also had one that was kind of a downer that wasn't really a rabbit hole in the sense that I didn't get sucked in by surprise. Erin, in book 3, Erin returns to her home world, which is our world. And she had lived in California, and in book 1, she flees through the portal, escaping the firestorms that were the real firestorms that happened near where I live. And so she has to temporarily go back to her world to do some things. And it's about 5 weeks after the fires, and I had to go back and take a look at some of the pictures because I was writing, even though it's a fictional town, I picked a lot of places that are places I know. And there was the town had a round barn that had been, you know, a landmark, and that was one of the things that burned, and I couldn't not have the round barn burning in there. I mean, it was just, there'd be no way I could have written about the fires and not talked about that. And that was not particularly fun, but the one that was fun and kind of weird was I needed to know quite a bit about the conductivity of various metals. So I read up on that, and then I bored all my friends for several days about, well, aluminum actually conducts electricity better than gold or copper, but the impedance rate is so high that it gets really hot really fast. And they'd be like, but we don't care. And I'd be like, but I do. So that was probably more of the unexpected, oh, look at this is cool. Oh, you know, and then days have gone by. So
Jim, Carol, thought we would round out on this question because, I mean, with the anthology, you guys didn't write any of them, but is there anything that popped out at you in any of the stories from the anthology that you said, oh yeah, I can tell where they fell down a rabbit hole, or something even that maybe you learned as you were going through the collection of stories, even if it's something that didn't make it in?
Oh, I have one in particular. Gordon Linsner has a fabulous story about medieval Japan, and you know that he knows everything that he's writing about in this story. And it's not just something you pick up a newspaper article and account for. So he definitely took a deep dive on that one. I thought that was fascinating. Jim, what do you think?
Yeah, that was one that came to mind. The other one, and I'm going to refer to the book so I get the title correct, is The Source of Father Santiago de Guerra de Vargas's Monstrous Crimes by Robert Masterson, which is a story about a priest traveling with the conquistadors through Central America and how he becomes sort of haunted by the ghosts of all of the native peoples that are being uprooted or killed, and their gods start to haunt him. And you can just tell from the writing, and parts of it Robert wrote in different languages, that he went pretty deep down a rabbit hole for that story. And it's a pretty powerful, haunting piece.
Mm-hmm. And Gordon's story was Moshigawa's Homecoming.
Yes.
Yeah, they were both astounding for the knowledge that they shared with us.
Well, guys, it sounds like we've got everybody stacked up with a lot for their to-be-read pile, and it is that summer vacation season, so it's time to add them up. So, but before we get out of here, let's make sure everybody knows where to find you guys. So, because I can, and the adults aren't here. So, Becke, I'm going to let you go first.
You can find me at BeckeTurner.com. I'm also on Facebook as Becke Turner. You can go to my website. Also, you can find my books on Amazon, and again, Murphy's Choice. It's going to be released here on the 20th of this month.
Matthew?
You can reach me, jamsaunders.com is my website. I have links to all of my social media there: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can also find links to all my books there, information on my books. They are available also on Amazon as well. And that's about it.
Darin?
Darin or me?
Darin.
Kennedy.com.
Nice.
That's the chess series. This is my Fugue and Fable series. Everything's available on Amazon. You can get it from your local bookstore. You can order it at Barnes and Noble. I'm easy to find. DarinKennedy.com.
Carol?
I can be found at carolgyzander.com, and my Forget Me Not novella is from the Neo Paradoxa imprint of eSpec Books, so you can find that there. It's already out and available on Amazon as well.
Ty?
You can find me at tydrago.com. Most of my books are for sale there. They, of course, are also available on Amazon and elsewhere. The most recent published one, Rags, comes out in a month, is Dragons, that came out last year, also from eSpec Books. And I'm available on social media.
Marion?
You can find me at deedsandwords.com, and links to my books are there. That's my website. I'm on Twitter as Marion D_D. You can find my Falstaff books at Amazon. You can find my Tor.com novella, Come Up and Serve Cold, in independent bookstores and Amazon and wherever books are sold.
And Jim?
You can check out my website, www.jameschambersonline.com, and there's plenty of information there about not only the books I've edited, but the books I've written, including my recent collections on the Night Border and on the Hierophant Road. And for Even in the Grave, you should be able to find that pretty much any major book selling outlet and at eSpec Books.
Jim, would you hold it up again? Because I thought you had a really cool cover and I didn't get a good look at it the first time.
Oh, I'd be happy to.
Gorgeous cover.
Yeah,
This-
that's a gorgeous cover.
Really beautiful.
It's a gorgeous cover by Lynn Hanson, who
Yes.
does wonderful,
doing
wonderful horror
rags.
covers. Yes,
Awesome.
Lynn
yes.
does great covers.
Nice, very, very nice.
Yeah, we were thrilled with what Lynn did, and it really captured the spirit, no pun intended, of the book.
Yeah, thank you, Marion. Thank you.
It's quite haunting.
Mhm.
And I've had the pleasure of being your host this evening, Jim Nettles. You can find me at jamespnettles.com, authoressentials.net, authoressentialsworkshops.com, at the speculativefictionacademy.com, and of course here at ConTinual. And we will see all of you guys again soon.
Bye.
Thanks much.
Thanks so
everyone.
much.
Thanks for having us.